Good morning, panel. Good morning, everyone. This is the House Prevention of Discrimination panel. We're going to have a short meeting today. First, we're going to have a wonderful introduction, and then we're going to just touch on the work of the next few weeks, kind of outline that. A message from the speaker's office and calendar. We're going to be brave and do calendar work during a meeting and see if we can figure out a time where we could meet on a regular basis, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. So I'm so thrilled to start out by introducing our colleague as a new member of the panel, Representative Kalaki of South Burlington. Welcome, Representative Kalaki, and thank you for stepping forward and joining us in this work.
Well, thank you, Maury, and you know, I look forward to it. I got very excited when especially Chris and Kelly, we don't get a chance to do very much together. So I thought, well, this is fantastic to get to know some new people better. And Maury and Taylor and I have done things, but that's the great interest for me, is to work with all of you on this.
Great. It is. We are a wonderful group. So, and also for those that can't see, the head of legislative operations, and we're lucky to have him as our committee assistant, Mike Ferrant, is always with us. All right, to start with, we've been tasked with, as you know, the policy and reviewing the policy and updating it, which I think it's good that we're doing that continuously as we have experience with particular issues that are brought our way. We learn about, with Legislative Counsel Damian Leonard's help, how we can improve the policy. The other part of our work is to help the House members in particular, but all staff as well, bring resources to all of us to help us understand what discrimination and harassment is, and who it impacts, how it impacts them. And I think that it was telling that there were the type of questions when we had our training the other day that were asking for scenario-based information, because it can be difficult to, even for people who have experience working with cases of discrimination and harassment, it can be difficult to identify whether it is and what it is and where on the scale. So part of our work will be to educate each other in the body of House, and Damian Leonard, our legislative counsel, is just coming on now. Hi, Damian.
Hi, sorry I was a little late.
Good morning.
That's all right. So we introduced Representative Kalaki as our new member, and I'm just starting to go into what our next work is, which involves education, training, and regular communication, and how we're going to do that. So I think all of you are aware of this other group that is doing work around, that does involve discrimination, and that's the Social Equity Caucus. Their work is much broader, but they definitely touch on these issues and have a wealth of resources in individuals and experience and skills that they can bring to the General Assembly. There are two other groups that you may not be as familiar with, and one is called the White Affinity Group, or WAG, and this is a space where folks like us, white folks, can learn about equity and discrimination and issues around I'm losing my words. Issues around discrimination based on race and skin color. And the reason we have a separate group for white people to have these conversations is that it should be our work and done in a way, in a space that protects others that would be impacted by our learning and our maybe our mistakes. We want to do that in a in our own space and not burden others with it. Similarly, there's a Black affinity space where they can also do their own work. And there may be other groups. There's the women's group. The Women's Caucus is another, excuse me, group that may bring information to us. So because all of this work is being done in different groups, the Speaker of the House asked that any proposals come through one committee or one body. And she asked that happen through the House Prevention of Discrimination panel. Taylor, can you describe, go into a little bit more detail about some of the work that has started to happen in streamlining and creating effective channels between these groups that will also inform the House Prevention of Discrimination panel?
Absolutely. So I've not been participating in the White Affinity group, but I've learned a lot about what is happening in that space. And it seems very parallel to the work that we're doing here. I know as we were working in the off session and discussing those ongoing conversations, recognizing that a one-time training is, yes, helpful, but may not illuminate fully what harassment and discrimination can look like in this space. The Social Equity Caucus and the White Affinity Group in particular, we're also taking on these pieces, but we're looking at it from a different lens of witnesses and how we are supporting and preparing witnesses and coming into that space. So we were on the education end for legislators and staff, and they were coming in saying, well, what information are we giving to witnesses as they are also protected by the policy that we have in place here? So they, in coordination with Mari and myself and members of the White Affinity Group, they put together kind of a timeline that they would like to see enacted in this year, including, of course, I would say the basics that we knew would happen, which was the discrimination prevention training this year, those ongoing conversations, updating forms so that witnesses have the full breadth of information, rather than currently, I think what is provided depends on the committee, but the overall sheet is kind of how to access Zoom and participate in Zoom and not necessarily the full breadth of coverage. And then another piece is really having continuity between the chambers, recognizing that this is one of those panels that only exists in the House and that there is not an equivalent in the Senate. I think we look to our partner panel, which would be the sexual harassment prevention panel, and that has continuity through both chambers. So I think it's a larger conversation to have across the full General Assembly, but kind of starting more narrowly is really continuing on our conversation of those small group activities or prompts. Was that helpful, Mari?
You're muted, Mari.
And as Mari finds the unmute button. This is the graph that I was talking about in kind of setting up a schedule for the year.
So that was perfect. Thank you, Taylor. And again, as if there are other groups that each of us, any of us become aware of that would feed into this work, because there are many, as we know, many protected characteristics and groups. We can take that information and stream it through the House Prevention of Discrimination panel. I'm going to pull this up here so you can see the rest of the table. Representative Kalaki.
Thank you, Maury. You asked me to talk a little bit about what I bring to the panel and to my colleagues here. And those that know me know that I walk with a cane. I'm paraplegic. 26 years ago, I was paralyzed from the neck down, and have no sensation in my legs. And right now I'm sitting in a wheelchair at home, which is actually the easiest mode, but it is completely impossible to bring the wheelchair into the State House. We have a completely inaccessible building. And those of us that do have canes, there's a number of us, had to ask to be seated by an aisle versus and was resisted by tenured members saying, well, that's not how new members get their seats. And they're like, well, the ADA was passed in 1990, and legislators are still saying, so there's that. And then, let's see, it was 3 years ago on Homeless Awareness Day. No, I mean, Disability Awareness Day. All of our advocates were in the State House. And I was told by one of our friends who was using a wheelchair that they were told they had to not come into the chamber and sit outside. And so I went to the speaker's office, and Mitzi wasn't in her office at that time. So I spoke to her assistant, and it was just, people were clueless. It's like, well, I don't know what to do. There's an access issue. And I said, we can't have Disability Awareness Day and not allow people to come in. And so I just, our Sergeant of Arms was confused about what to do and said, well, we can't block access to the aisles. So I just brought the people into their chairs. And so I think disability is a huge thing, especially in people testifying in our committees. And are we providing accessible ways to do that? And is it virtually, is it possible? And if people ask for accommodation, can we bring ASL into a committee meeting, or onto the floor debates and things like that? And I think that because there's so few of us who are disabled in our body, that it's just people are just ignorant about it. It's not that they're against it, but that's a really extreme form of, I was told I couldn't even have a disability placard on a house license plate because it would change the design of the plate.
Oh my goodness.
It's like, well, change the design of the plate, and so anyway, it's just, as we talk about these issues, our committees work a lot with disability communities. And I think we have to look at how we're inviting those communities in, how we're treating each other, and what our policies are. And so it's a pretty daunting veil of ignorance that in this category too. So I hope at some point we can include that and have, almost a disability 101 training for our legislators to just get people a little more aware of it. So anyway.
I agree. Thank you, Representative, for bringing that to our attention. And I agree, it's long overdue. And I look forward to working with you and this panel and others to raise awareness and then make progress in how we can make the State House, including the virtual State House, more accessible.
Even, our website is actually not accessible. So for people who want to read and enter into it, it's just not accessible. So it's an interesting issue of design.
Sounds like a very big project, and we should be doing this work. Thank you.
Certainly.
Great. Any other comments about this proposal? And I'll send it by email so you have access to it. And remember, this is just one collaboration around a certain area of protected characteristics. Representative Kalaki brought us another one. Any questions on this? Okay. See Kelly shaking her head. So the next step will be to, I think, create an outline of what kind of tasks we want to do first. I see one as being setting up communication, the next communication to the House. So I don't want to get into planning that right now, but we can communicate by email. Please send me your ideas about what the next communication to the House could be. I'll be meeting with the speaker this afternoon about the next steps for this prevention panel. And then we can work on also next, maybe another training in the small group conversations and how we might set those up. Anything to add there? Everyone willing to work in an email space with some of these ideas? Okay. Lastly, should we jump on a calendar, or does anyone have anything else to add before we go to the calendar?
Calendar sounds good to me.
Let's start with how often we want to meet. Every other week? Oh, Representative Kalaki.
Well, I know most of the caucuses have to meet over in the other building. And I'm hoping we can actually meet in the State House, because with the ice and the snow, it's actually impossible for me to walk to the other building.
Okay.
So with everyone's, that we can meet in the, maybe in the cafeteria or something.
Definitely. And so I can work with the Sergeant at Arms and Mike Ferrant about finding a space. I'm wondering also if it makes sense. If it makes sense to meet virtually, but now I'm questioning that too, as the noise in the background is getting louder. Thank you for protecting us from my husband's puppies. So I'm wondering if it would make sense also to meet virtually.
I think depending on when we schedule our meetings for, having a hybrid available would be great. And just reflecting on last year, I know our meeting time was Friday. I believe it was evenings. We tried to end the day with this meeting, which is an option, of course, but I would definitely prefer to go before that time, because late day Friday meeting is not at the top of my priority list.
So one possibility would be Friday at noon. I know the Women's Caucus meets then, and there are so many other caucuses. It's likely that we will have to meet at a time when another caucus is meeting. Is
Could
anyone in the Women's
Friday-
Caucus?
I am. I know Representative Kalaki as well regularly.
Okay.
I wonder if 9 a.m. on Friday would work for folks.
The House starts at 9:30, right? What about 8:30 on Friday?
8:30 would be better, I think.
That works.
And
That
should we
works for me as
start
well.
weekly for now? Because we have a fair amount of work ahead of us, but we can, especially as we get towards the end of the session when things are getting even busier, we can meet every other week or on an as needed basis.
Well, I think establishing it like an 8:30 Friday, even if it's just a short check-in, or if it's a working session, it could be a 15-minute meeting or an hour-long meeting, depending on what's, that's great.
Okay. And Mike Ferrance, is that a possibility for your team?
Mike says yes.
Okay. Oh, there it is. All right, then that was easier than I thought it would be. And I will reach out to the Sergeant at Arms and see what space might be available Fridays at 8:30, and just be prepared that initially we may need to meet virtually. Damien, does that work for you, the 8:30 on Fridays?
Yeah, that should work for me. The Senate committees sometimes meet that early, so I may periodically just need to miss a meeting to go testify in committee. So,
Okay,
but I'll work with those meetings to the extent that I don't have a conflict get scheduled by the Senate. So,
great.
And that would exclude this coming Friday since we're meeting today.
Yes, we're going to start our work on what it is we're going to be communicating about. We'll do that by email. So send me your topics, your ideas, and we can also work with these other groups. They may have ideas, and the groups themselves have individuals who've been doing education for many years. So they're going to be a wonderful resource. So we can lift that up very easily. All right, I don't have anything else. I'm glad we got a date. Anybody have any other issues before we wrap up? All right, stay warm, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.